Just a quick listener note. This show contains raw conversation about drugs, alcohol, childhood trauma, sexual assault, active addiction, and suicide. It also contains coarse language. Please use care when listening, and I hope you enjoy the episode. Welcome back to another episode of Recovery APN. My name is Dan, and I'm your host, and I'm joined by Keith.
Hey, Dan. Happy to be back.
Happy to be back is right. Another great episode. Kind of funny beginning. What you guys will hear is that Christine and I, our guest, was actually in treatment together about 2.5 years ago. And I remembered Christine. However, she had no idea who I was. So pretty humbling experience for me.
I was wondering, was that a shot to the ego or is it okay for you?
Yeah, shot to the ego for sure. But I will say, maybe I just had, my head down low and I was just doing all the right things.
Sure.
And maybe I didn't make that big of an impression, which I'll take also as a, pat on the back.
That's fair. Sometimes it's better not to be remembered,
Correct. I really enjoyed this episode.
Me too. This is a pretty special episode. I loved that she came in, told us she was an introvert, and neither of us were really sure how this interview was going to go. And as you guys will hear, start to finish, she's a blast to listen to. Her story is fascinating. And Dan, you did a great job. Thanks.
Yeah, I thought what was most intriguing and what I loved about it was the comeback story. She talked about what brought her to APN. She talked about her experience at APN. But, with her being here 2.5 years ago, she has, about 2 years of life experience after APN. And she goes into kind of all those experiences and her come up after leaving. And it's an incredible journey. And I think what was special and what resonated to me, especially for individuals that are in AA, they talk about the promises. If you go through the necessary steps and you do all the right things, these promises come to be. And just hearing it in her voice and her story, it's so true. So it was really special for me to hear that and for us to hear that. And I'm so excited for her journey. And I think, Keith, you said it was this is just the first chapter in it. There's so much more ahead. And I think we could both agree that we're really excited.
Yeah, this is a really unique episode, at least in my point of view, because this is her lead up story is fascinating and a crazy story that led her to treatment. But her after story or her now story is maybe the longest part of this interview, which is not typically how our show goes, but it's so fascinating listening to where she is now that I think people are really going to enjoy this episode.
Yes, agreed. I'm very excited for you all. If you haven't yet, please follow, subscribe, and looking forward to everyone listening. Without further ado, enjoy the episode. Christine, welcome to Recovery APN.
Oh, thank you. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, it's really a pleasure. And it's awesome to have an alumni come on that's had some time.
Yeah.
It's been, I would say, 2 years since last time you were here, right?
Yeah, I came April of 2021 and I left July of 2021.
Yeah, so I think you came a month before me and we left around the same time. I left in July of 2021.
Right, and I don't remember you at all.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to say that, but it was pretty humbling when I saw Christine today and I said, it's so great to see you. I don't know if you remember that we were in treatment together. And she said, no.
No, sorry.
Well, for me, it's nice to see you again. And
Thank
for
you.
you, it's probably nice to meet you.
Yes, it is nice to meet you.
Yeah. But yeah, no, you look great.
Thanks.
It's awesome that you're here. It's awesome you're doing well. And I'm genuinely excited to hear about kind of your story. I know a little bit, bits and pieces because I do remember, but I'm excited for our listeners to listen to it and also kind of hear about what you're up to, in present day. So this is,
Okay.
as much as I think our listeners are excited, like I personally am like very excited and very vested in this episode.
Okay.
You like that, Keith? Vested.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
Good
yeah.
word choice.
Vested's a $10 word. That's nice. Well done.
So to start, I like to give kind of our guests kind of the structure of the podcast.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
we chatted about it earlier, but obviously there was something that led you to coming to APN, and whether they be multiple hurdles or downfalls, however you want to describe it, would love to hear about that and kind of what made you pick up the phone to call APN, and then dive into kind of your experience at APN. I know we both shared a therapist, Dustin, so
Yes.
curious to hear about your relationship with him and other individuals in the community. And then again, lastly, what you're up to today and how you're utilizing the tools, and what other groups or things you're doing to keep up, all the good work that you've been doing.
Okay, well, coming to APN was kind of a crazy ride. So APN was my second treatment center. I had been to treatment in Florida years before, and I had been struggling with addiction since I was like 19. Growing up, though, I was like the best kid. Like I didn't do anything I shouldn't have done. I didn't even drink. Like I was the best kid. And then when I had legal consequences, I decided to do all the drugs. And then I ended up going to treatment once in Florida, and that wasn't the best experience, but like I stayed sober 11 months, and then I kind of dipped back into my DOC, which is opiates and benzos. What led me to APN was I was working as a nurse, and I have been a nurse for over 10 years, and I picked up a night shift, and I don't remember the shift. Like I ended up stealing or diverting oxycodone, and then I was shooting myself up with Ativan, like straight Ativan. And I guess I disappeared. No one could find me. So then they found me in a bathroom with needles all around, and I got escorted off the premises by police and was sent home. And then obviously I was terminated. I didn't have any legal consequences, but at that point I was like, something's got to give. Like I got to go back. And because I had done the treatment in Florida, I knew not to call a 1-800 number because they'll just send you out of state. So I looked up places, and I found All Points North.
And you were living in Colorado at the time.
Yeah, I lived in Meeker, which is like 3 hours away.
Got it.
So I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go into treatment. And I also kind of knew that like I was living with my parents and my husband, that it was either like go somewhere and do something or like get out. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll go. And I knew this time, like the board of nursing would be getting involved. Like I probably was losing my nursing license. So I was like, I might as well go. And then, of course, when you look up All Points North, it says luxury rehab, or at least it did. And I was like, yes, I am luxurious and I deserve luxury. So I'm going to go here. And I think I did the admissions stuff. And like 2 days later, I was here. And I remember the admissions guy, one of the questions is like, what's your biggest barrier? And I was like, my ego, because like I have really low self-esteem, but I have the ego the size of Texas. And he's like, I think you should come here. And I was like, I think so too. So I ended up coming in on April 1st. And of course, I took everything I could take on the way up. And then on the way up, I'm saying like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to really put my all in. And then I get in, and we were still like having to quarantine for a little bit.
It was like 7-day quarantine.
Right. So then you're just up in this room, which is like a super nice room by yourself. And as soon as I got up there and the door shut, I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to do this. Like, nah, I don't want to be vulnerable. And then I had something in me that just was like, no, I think you're too broken. Like, you can't be fixed. So you're going to do everything, and you're going to prove to everybody that they can't fix you. And that's kind of how I went into like the milieu, like the groups, doing it. And then I met my therapist, which was Dustin.
Well, I guess before we jump into your APN experience.
Okay.
So going back to the nursing piece.
Yeah.
So you're a licensed nurse.
Yeah.
And the situation happens.
Yeah.
And let's talk about like the repercussions. So when that happened, did they reach out to you and said, Christine, like there's a chance you're going to lose your license if you don't get treatment? Like, what did that look like before you decided to go to treatment? Like, what was that situation like?
I mean, I knew, just because I know how the board works, that it was going to come down to something. I just didn't know what it was. And at the time, I didn't have a license in Colorado. I was licensed in Arkansas, but it's a compact, so like I can work in Colorado. So they told me to self-report to Arkansas. So I did, and I didn't hear anything. And so by the time I got into treatment, I didn't know what was going to happen, but I was pretty sure either I was going to lose the license or it was going to be a long battle with lawyers, or I would have the opportunity to revoke. And so I wasn't sure what I was going to do.
Did those like unforeseen like options, right? Or did those unforeseen outcomes really push you to go to APN and get the help you need?
No, I don't think it did, because at the time I was very numb to kind of everything, and I could only feel anger. So I was just angry, and there was like no accountability. And then I also just got angry to the point of like, I don't even want to be a nurse. So like, I don't care what they do.
Got it.
So it wasn't really a motivating factor. I mean, in the end, it was a good idea, but I don't think that's what pushed me into APN.
What it looked like, what the support looked like from your parents? Your mom, dad, and husband at the time?
My parents have always been super supportive, but since they had been through it before, they were like, listen, you can either go get help or we can buy a burial plot. Like that's where you're at. That's what's going to happen. And my husband was very much like, you either go get help or I'm not going to be around.
So that was like pushing you, like also a little bit of motivation there.
Yeah, for sure. And like I said, I had been to treatment before, so for all of them, they're just like, I don't know what's going to be different.
Got it.
Yeah.
When you said you were mad, who were you mad at? Mad at yourself? Mad that you got caught? Mad?
I was mad I got caught. Like I was like, I am dumb. Like I have been stealing drugs from hospitals, like spoiler alert, forever. And how did I get caught? Like I'm better than this. Like it was that ego. And then I was just angry that people would like expect me to take accountability. Like, what is that? And no, I'm fine. Like, I literally, like in my head, I was like, I was shooting up all these medicines and I was still running laps around these other nurses. Like, come on. That's the ego. I don't have that anymore.
It's so funny. What comes up for me and like how I could relate is I remember on certain scenarios where I thought I was smarter than everyone else in the room.
Oh, yeah.
Sober or high.
Yeah.
And so even like high, I thought I was smarter. Like I thought I was way smarter. And there were plenty of times where I got caught and I wasn't I wasn't mad that I got caught. I was mad. I got mad that I was caught, that I wasn't high, right? They wasn't in trouble. I was like, fuck. Like they just found the pills and I have to go rebuy more.
Yeah.
Or so on and so forth. And I'm pissed off at those people for even looking at it. But I didn't like think about like what their perception was of it, and like think like I was doing these things and they were getting mad that I was like almost like getting to a point where probably killing myself or whatever it was, and I'm mad that they're like minding my like in my business trying to find like these pills. And I'd be like, I remember one time I had them in like an Advil container like at next to my bed, and like someone came up to my room and it was during COVID at my parents' house, and like they just shook it and opened it and they like saw the pills and they looked at me. I was like, what do you expect? And I was just like, man, I'm like, how could I be so dumb? Like, why did I leave them out there?
Yeah,
and
I'm better than this.
And then my first thought was like, all right, like just wasted like $200 there. Like, not even thinking about the repercussions. It was more about like, fuck, now I gotta get out of bed and call the drug dealer.
Right.
And like,
have my whole life be about chasing this high.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
No, it's funny you put it that way.
Yeah.
All right, so diving into APN, you get out of quarantine.
I do, finally. And I was terrified because I don't like having roommates. And so I knew I was going to have a roommate, and I was not excited about it. And then I met my roommate, Kirsten, who's amazing. And she's like this, she's in her 50s, but she has more energy than I ever had. And her and I just clicked. And I was like, okay, maybe this will be okay, because at least I like this lady for now. I can't trust her because I don't trust anybody, but like maybe this will be okay. And then I met Dustin, who was my therapist, who I later found out didn't work with a ton of females at the time. So I also felt very special. And I remember my first meeting with Dustin. He was like, listen, we got to go through this thing. And like, you can tell me all the traumas of your life, but like, we have 28 days to figure this out for you, because that's what I signed up for, is 28 days. He's like, so we can either hash out everything or you can tell me what the actual issues are. And I was like, okay, like I can get with this guy. Like, this guy's pretty chill. And yeah, so and then Dustin and I just clicked, and I was like, thank God I had Dustin. Like, that probably was the turning point, because Dustin does this thing where he matches energy. So like, if I came in and I was like not willing to work, then he didn't work. If I was happy, he was happy. If I wanted to act like I was this, bad person, he was down with it. Dustin was crazy good. And he's like a psychopath, because like, he would get into my head and I'd be like, oh, screw that douchebag. Like, oh, and then he'd be right every time. So Dustin totally changed up my whole experience here.
Let's talk about Dustin for a second.
Oh gosh. Oh yeah, Dustin.
No, I like how you put it. I didn't think about it like this way, and I would agree with you 100%. I liked how you put matching energy. And what comes to mind for me is like looking at a mirror and realizing how smart, dumb you look, or whatever the adjectives may be. It's like when you come to an appointment and you're like pissed off at the world and you don't want to do anything and you don't see how dumb you look.
Right.
And you're taking it out on the other person when they don't deserve it. And he has the ability to match that energy, and you kind of comes to a realization that's like, I'm acting like a sourpuss for no reason, and now I see it with my eyes, and it's like you change right off the bat. Yeah. And so I never thought about it like that, but it's interesting because now I look back and I see that.
For sure. And what the other thing that was cool about Dustin is like, I came in being really numb, so I had trouble figuring out my emotions, but the only emotion I knew and was comfortable with was anger. And I had been to therapy before where they're like, you really need to like work on that, like fix that. And Dustin's like, screw that, use it to your ability to figure this out. And I remember one of the very first couple things Dustin told me was like, he's like, you seem like a person that loves to win. And he's like, you'll even lose to win, like lose a hand of poker to win the pot. And I was like, yeah, I would. He's like, then you've got to lose to sobriety to win. You have to, and you have to make that choice, and you have to do it now. And that was like a whole different level of like ninja-y, because I was like, you're right. I do need to do that. And he's the first one that ever told me that, and it made sense to me.
It's all clicking in my head.
Yeah.
And I have a similar personality to you where I enjoy being right.
Yes.
I enjoy winning. And I, too, would lose to win. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that he put it like that, because it's mind-blowing and it works. It's
so simple, and I use it to this day.
What I also found with Dustin, and I'm curious to know if you felt the same way or the interactions, is he changed my perception of what sobriety is. Yes. He always continued to say, use it as a renaissance. Identify what makes you happy and go achieve it. There's nothing after you get the sobriety thing under your belt. There's nothing that could stop you from enjoying life, being happy, and going after your dreams. And I always thought to myself, like, my dreams were too big, and I'm okay here. Yeah. I don't need to get here. I'm okay here. And removing kind of the drug use and that Band-Aid, it allowed me to say, okay, yes, my dreams are here. I'm going to try to get them. And if I don't, that's okay too.
Yeah. And he did this, the very last thing Dustin ever told me on the day that I left was so powerful and so simple, but he was just like, you deserve sobriety, and I need you to know that. And I use that to this day too. Because even that simple, like it's not that I needed it, it's that I deserved it. And that was something that was very simple and powerful. And the last thing he literally said to me.
I'm curious if you feel this way too. So not growing up, but towards like my active addiction days and like trying to get sober, I had a number of therapists. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until I met Dustin that I was like, okay, tip of the cap, I respect you.
Yeah.
And I think a big piece of it was like his sobriety.
Yes.
And that I respected everything he said because he had gone through a similar journey.
Yeah.
And that kind of like allowed me to put my guard down and say, okay, I could trust this guy. He gets it.
Yeah, and I mean, that was from day one. I don't know what it was, like his straight up attitude. I was like, I can do this. Like, I don't feel like he's just going to give me a lot of like, learn to love yourself. Like, he was like, yeah, we're not. We're going to use what you have and also like use the skills that you have in your active addiction to be actively in recovery. Like, you can still use those skills, just use them for good, not for evil. Simple. He's simple dude, but I mean, impact.
Totally.
I haven't talked to that guy since the time I left, and I love that guy to the ends of all. Like he's probably, and it's not even that he saved my life. He taught me how to save my own, and that's the most powerful thing he gave me.
Wow, I love that.
Yeah. I do love that we have this Dustin podcast that we've recorded several episodes of now. Was there anyone else in your stay here on staff that made a profound impact?
Well, and because I was Dustin's client, my process group was ran by Katie, and she's almost the female Dustin. So she really helped me on my like way through. And then also I had Kim as my case manager. Amazing lady. I know she doesn't work here anymore, but amazing, really stood up for me, was there for me, shared a lot of her story with me as I was going through like the board of nursing and then like possible legal stuff. She was there. And then like Michael was a great therapist. He wasn't mine, but we did groups with him. His stuff was crazy good. And then who else? Brandy, who did Reiki.
Yeah.
I did not think that seemed so mystical woo-woo to me, but it was the best. Like she changed how I view myself. And that was really powerful. And I mean, we had tons of great RAs. Like Rocky was one that towards the end of my stay started doing groups and stuff. Love that dude.
Yeah, and let's talk about like the community aspect and how that helped you. Like I've always said, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it, but surrounding yourself, well, number one, being willing to go to any length to get sober and get the help.
Yeah.
And coupling that with surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals. I'm kind of curious on your thought on that. Well,
I ended up getting in good with Kirsten, and then Drew was another one. And we were kind of the three amigos. Like, and I'm an introvert, so I don't like having a ton of people around me. My roommate Kirsten loved people, so she always like brought me into like these sober parties. And that's what I remember the most about APN is like we learned how to have sober fun in like a safe environment. And so that when I left, it wasn't as crazy to think like you can have fun being sober. Like we used to hang out in the hot tub. We used to go up and watch sunsets. And, I don't think it's a secret that APN has NFL guys that come in. They would come hang out with us, the best guys, intimidating to look at, nicest guys. And so we would just have like this community of just fun. And that was more powerful than anything else. And then in the process groups, it was all empowerment, especially like because I was in a female process group and I don't interact well with females, but I loved each and every one that I had. And I was able to be vulnerable, able to talk about things I still probably don't talk about today. But I was able to be open in that space. And that was what was interesting about APN. because I felt like I was emotionally exhausted the whole time because I was doing the work, but I still had so much fun. And like Kirsten and Drew are still to this day my best friends. Like we still have like a group chat, we Zoom, we talk to each other. Kirsten just came up last week and we hung out for a couple of days. Like those are my lifelong friends.
Yeah, that's incredible. And one thing I wanted to ask is, what was the big difference between your stay in Florida and APN?
Well, the stay in Florida, it wasn't bad. Part of the stay in Florida was I was there for like 58 days, and I didn't start opening up in groups until the last 2 weeks I was there. And it was like this inability to be vulnerable, and I was really scared about that. And then coming into APN, once I started doing the groups, what I liked, too, was like it's not all like, here's a drug, don't crave it. Like it's all about life skills and how to like live your best life. But also I felt comfortable enough to be vulnerable, even when I had to tell myself, like, in reality, in 2 years, I'm not going to talk to half of these people, so it doesn't matter if they know my deepest, darkest secrets, because I need someone to know. Mm-hmm. And that I think is what the biggest difference was. I mean, and the one in Florida, you ended up living across from a trap house. It wasn't the best. It wasn't the best situation.
Now let's kind of talk about life after APN.
Okay. Well, and life after APN was interesting, mostly because I chose to come for 28 days. And I met a girl early on that was like, I'm here for 60 days. And I'm like, you're crazy. And then I ended up voluntarily staying for 84. And by the time I left, I had 2 weeks of kind of pure boredom, because Dustin was like, you need to be here and you need to be bored and you need to be sober, because it's like one of your triggers. And literally on my discharge plan, Dustin wrote, like, my biggest relapse trigger was my husband. And that's why I should go to sober living. And I didn't go to sober living. And if Dustin hears this, he was right. I should have gone to sober living. But I went home. And I think the hardest thing about coming home is your family has been away from you, and they're like hearing about all this great stuff. So my husband, I think, kind of almost expected me not to have like my angry moments, because like I'm fixed. And it's like, no, that behavior's still there. I still have to work on it. I have a lot of work to do. And then one of the things Dustin told me was like, don't hesitate to play the recovery card. So like, if you don't want to do something, if it's not in your best interest, play that recovery card every time. And so that's what I did. And I think that was really hard. And it was hard for me because I had to be really selfish in a way that was hard to understand. And also, I went back. So by the time I left APN, I was still in a dispute with the Board of Nursing. So like I had a lawyer and I was doing the things, but my lawyer told me, like, this is going to take a year. So for a year, I couldn't be a nurse. Like, I like to say the Board of Nursing gave me the opportunity to not be a nurse for a year. Mm-hmm. So, I lived in a really small town where they definitely heard about what happened, and I was definitely judged. So I couldn't even find a job. And I was like, I'm living with my parents. I can't be a nurse. How am I going to get out of this situation? And on top of that, when you abuse benzos for as long as I did, you can have a really long period of anhedonia, and which means like I didn't feel joy, I just didn't feel. And I had that for 6 months after I left. So there were times that my recovery was just kind of white knuckling it. I also went home to a place that had no in-house meetings. The closest in-house meeting was maybe 45 minutes away. So I had to do a lot of Zoom meetings. But luckily I did IOP. So I jumped right back into IOP. And then I stayed with APN outpatient with my therapist all the way through that January. And then what happened was, I honestly, through some connections in my small town, I got a job as a lunch lady, as a cafeteria lady. Shout out to them. They work so hard. But it was part-time, and it was probably making the least amount of money I've ever made. Like, I maybe brought home $600 a month for the whole month. And I was like, this is humbling. oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do? And then I still was like, I don't even know if I want to be a nurse. Like, I don't really like what I do. And like, I had decided, and I'm still pursuing it, that I want to become a licensed addiction counselor. And then I found out that like, if I lost my nursing license, it could affect that too. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? But I just did the right next thing. Like, I just did my job the best that I could do. I lied to them and said I love to bake. I didn't know how to bake, but I figured it out. And we just kind of trudged on. Like, I kept with my IOP. I kept with my meetings. I went when I didn't want to go. I went double when I didn't want to go. I worked with a sponsor. I was open with my family. And I didn't attend things. There were just things I didn't do. Because if I felt like it was a risk to my sobriety, it wasn't worth it. And I was like, even if I don't go to this concert, great. In a year, maybe I can. Like, it's a short-term thing. And then I still did a lot of the stuff Dustin told me to do. Like, I had to journal. He loves to journal 3 pages on these stoic, like, meditations. I was doing that for that whole time. 3 pages is hard, but that's where the magic is.
Right.
And I was just trying. The other thing that happened that led me to stay longer is Dustin always has the magic question, which is, if all your problems were gone tomorrow, what would you do? And I failed that 20 times. Because like, I was like, oh, well, my addiction's gone and like everything's fine. He's like, that's not the answer. So I started to pursue that. And at the end, it was just like, I want to be happy with what I'm doing. I want to make a difference. I want to work in recovery. And I just want to make myself proud. And like, I don't want my parents to fear that I'm going to die from a drug overdose. And so that's what I did. And I just started repairing relationships, not just by like saying I'm sorry, but like taking accountability, trying to put myself in their shoes, and not getting angry when I was questioned. Because there were definitely times that my husband was like, you seem really tired. What are you doing? And it was kind of that immediate, like, I was like, well, screw you, you know? But then I had to come from compassion and realize, like, this dude has been with me through both of my treatments. And there were times that he rushed home from work because he was convinced I had overdosed and died. And like, I cannot imagine living in that fear. And I did that. So like, I'm going to have compassion. And like, him and I went to marriage counseling for a while. We still go occasionally. But like, I just started to focus more on repairing my relationships than what I was doing for work. And then the Board of Nursing eventually came back, and I left here in July. And in May of 2022, they finally let me have a nursing license with a ton of restrictions. And I'm monitored by a program. So I'm randomly drug tested. I have to be watched while I pee. I have to do all these, weird requirements. But like, and my employer has to make sure certain precautions are in place. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to go back into nursing, and I'm going to do it in recovery, because I think that's the only safe place I can do this. Because anywhere else, I'm going to fucking steal meds. And it's not even necessarily to take, it's just to prove that I can. It's like this antisocial thing I have. So then I started looking at different spots. And for the first time in my life, because like, once you get a nursing job, as long as there's nothing on your license, like, the interview is a formality. Like, they're just like, please come work for us. We need help. And this was the first time I was declined, like 3 or 4 times. I just had interview after interview, and they were like, no, you're too risky. And then I found Foundry Treatment Center, which is where I work now, in Steamboat. And my boss, whose name is Scott Kendall, who's amazing, decided to take the chance. And he heard my story, and he looked over the things, and it took 2 weeks, but he hired me. And so I now work as a nurse in treatment, in recovery, and I'm doing all the right things. And additionally, with my probation, it's like 3 years, so I can't go back to school yet for my addiction counseling thing. I'm still going to. But what's cool about that is that defiant nature in me too, was part of me was like, I need to prove to myself that I can do this nursing thing without stealing meds. And I can. And it's amazing. And I work now in a small treatment center, much smaller than APN. Like we can hold like 18 guys. And it's just a small treatment center where, you know, we're just trying to help our dudes with their things. And it's amazing because it reminds me of why I'm in recovery. And at the same time, I think the danger of working in recovery, being in recovery, is you can make that your recovery. And it's not mine. It has its place and I can use my recovery for good, but it's not where I put my recovery at the forefront.
I'm speechless.
Why?
I think it's incredible to hear everything you've done since you left APN. And like the first thing I'll say is you should be extremely proud of yourself.
I am. Thank you.
Because of all the hard work and determination that you put in. And I'll sit here and say it's not easy. The journey that we've gone through is not easy.
No.
And the way you've persevered through that, you should be extremely, extremely proud of yourself. And I know there were a lot of highs and a lot of lows to it. And the way you've gotten through it, simply amazing. Yeah. And I think, you know, so I want to commend you for that. And what an incredible, incredible journey so far.
Thank you.
And it's still more to come.
Yes.
But I think what you said was interesting, and it's something that I can relate to. It's as someone in sobriety and in recovery and working in recovery, it's important that my job is and working here is not my program.
Yeah.
It could be, obviously, you know, there is service work to that you could put in, and maybe it's having an additional conversation about someone who's struggling.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's the extra phone call for when they leave. I don't know if you could do that or not, but it's like for me, when they leave, making like the extra time where it's 7 p.m. I'm not necessarily on working, but I remember I had that conversation. Maybe I should double check.
Yeah.
And it's the extra service work or anything along those lines. But it's not my program, and I have to make sure that my program is here and my job is here. And yeah, maybe they'll overlap a little bit, and that's okay. But, you know, me coming to work is not my recovery.
No.
And a lot of people have that mixed up, and it's important like to draw that line in the sand.
Yeah, and I mean, one of my other addictions is just, we call it balls to the wall, but like I will work until you won't let me work anymore. And luckily with being on probation, I'm not allowed to do that. And my boss is very cognizant of it. So like I don't have that. Like when I'm at work, I'm at work. And when I'm not at work, I'm living my best life. Like I work to live. I don't live to work anymore. And that's also really, really important to kind of remember, especially like recovery work, because we get super invested in our clients. And I recently, about a month ago, I had a client I found out that unfortunately did pass away. And he was one of those clients that like you just hoped, and he was doing all the right things, you know, and it broke my heart. And that's actually how I found your guys' podcast, because I was searching for something. I just needed to hear something. And I saw that Dustin did the therapy unbox. And I was like, I'm going to listen because I just need to hear his voice and remember that, like, I can do this. And then I found the podcast. And I was like, well, this is what I'm going to listen to now. And that's the hard part too, is also that now I'm able to say, like, I need help. Like, I need to not be at work because this is affecting me too much. And then also it was hard to come back to work after that because it was kind of like hopeless. But one of the other things that I've always told myself is, like, in the word hopeless is the word hope. So you just have to find the hope in the hopeless, and then things will be better. And that's what I do. And that's what I do now. And I think that's what helps keep me sober, is just because, you know, there's always a light. There's always something.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. You're communicating it so nicely. And we work in a field where things happen, and unfortunate things happen.
Yeah.
And I think with sobriety and time in recovery, you gain the knowledge of like stopping and understanding the moment, and then trying to identify the next right move from there. Yeah. As opposed to listening and reacting right away. You have the opportunity to digest, feel however you're feeling, change the narrative, and take the next step forward. And I like what you said, where there's that hope in there too. And yes, you could have felt hopeless in that circumstance. And yeah, it's very sad.
Yeah.
But it's taking it and changing the narrative where I know for me, I didn't have that ability when I was using.
No.
Mine was A to B. How can I get from A to B in the fastest possible way with no one interrupting?
And I think that's what the sobriety has given me the most is like Dustin, one of the things he told me too was like, you love to live in chaos. Like you thrive in chaos. He's like, you need to thrive in non-chaos. And that's where I feel like I am now is like, I love my life without drama. I'm not part of chaos. My life is predictable and it's predictable in a way that I love. And my sober life is so much better than anything else. And I've made a life that is much easier to stay sober than it is to get high. And so, yeah, do I have cravings? Sure.
Of course.
Of course. And it's not a bad thing. And they're small. And even when, and it's almost like I head off the cravings. Like when I had that situation with my client that passed away, immediately I was like, this is going to be I'm going to have a huge craving. So I just did all the things that I normally would, and the craving never came.
And I could relate to that. It's like there's certain things that I'm so accustomed to relating to drugs. So whether it be flying, movies, sitting on the couch watching football, whatever it is, I know that. And before I even do those things, I prepare. And I remember like when I used to always fly, I used to always like pop a Xanax, go to sleep. And now it's like when I fly, or not anymore, but I'm early on in recovery, what I would do is I would download 3 movies, or have things prepared. Yeah. So like my mind wouldn't be going to like, oh, it would be amazing to take a Xanax right now and just like be like miserable. Yeah. And I do that. And I know like for when I was watching sports, like call my buddy up and invite someone to watch it with me instead of me be on the couch in my own head. Yeah. And then you kind of learn what your triggers are and you identify a process that can eliminate those within minutes as opposed to hours or relapsing.
Yeah, and I think also when being at APM made me realize and embrace who I am. So like I'm 100% an introvert, and I think I felt shame for that for a long time, which is part of the reason I use drugs, because then I could be social. And now I just embrace it. Like I'm like, I like it. I like that I just like to hang out at home, and that's okay. And I don't feel that sort of shame about who I am. Like it's kind of like hugging the cactus. Like I love all the good and bad in me, and it's okay to have that dichotomy too of like there's good, there's bad. But I just feel comfortable, like, and I kind of don't give an F anymore about judgments on that other people have on me. Because I tell everybody my story, and if you're going to judge me on it, that's cool, bro. Like, live your best life then.
I completely agree with that. And it's not easy to get to that point because for so long, there was a lot of fear of being judged. Yeah. And trying to keep up with certain people, to keep up with a certain image, so people weren't talking about you, whatever it is. And so it took time for me to get to a point where I'm going to walk into a room, I'm going to be authentic, and if someone doesn't like it, that's okay, and I'm not going to be bothered by it.
Yeah, I'm not going to take that personal.
I'm not going to wake up the next morning. I remember when I was drinking and using, and I'd go to events or anything, and I'd always act like a certain way and unauthentic. And I'd wake up and I'd have like those cringeworthy moments. I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I did this. I can't believe I was associated with that. Oh yeah. And I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh. And now I wake up, and even if I didn't have a great day, I know that I showed up authentic, and there's nothing I would change about it. The outcome is the outcome, and so be it. But I know I was the best version of myself, and I wouldn't change it. I don't feel cringe in the morning.
And I didn't think about that till you said that. But yeah, I used to do that, overthinking all of my interactions, and now I don't. Even if something was like a little awkward, if I'm talking to that person again, I'll just say it. I'll just say, like, that's another thing Dustin told me. Just say it. If things are awkward, just be like, this is awkward. And that's what I do. And that's what I do with my clients now. And I think that's why it works. Because they feel like, they've told me, maybe they're just blowing, stuff up my butt. But they're always like, you just seem super real. And I was like, it's because I've been through it. So, like, I'm not asking you to do anything I wouldn't do, nor that I do now. And you
Totally.
can live this best life if you just stay sober. And it just keeps getting better. Every year gets better. And I didn't believe that. Like, I was like, there's no way I'm never going to drink. Like, drinking's not my DOC. And honestly, I did it for a year to look to see if I made, like, if my life was better. And my life is better. So I just don't drink. I don't do drugs. I don't do any of it. And it's just better. My life is so much better.
I have to say, you're a true inspiration.
Oh, thanks.
Like, I don't know, Keith, I don't know how you feel. Like, my mom, this was something my mom would say, like, my heart is warm. My heart is warm. And it's truly amazing to hear everything you've gone through and where you're at today. And there's so much more, and there's so much more to your story that's to come. And there's no reason why you don't achieve like all of it.
Right.
You know, you're such on a great track. You're doing the right things. You're focused on the right things, and you're associating yourself with the right people. But at most, you have the perfect. You have a great mindset right now.
Yes.
And as long as you keep that, there's no reason why you can't attain all these other goals.
Yeah, no, and I think like APN, coming to APN, that was the difference. APN is just a different place. It's a safe space. And like even walking up now, it was weird. I haven't been here since I left, and it's just like coming home. Like it just feels right. So, I mean, and that's the thing. Like whether it's APN or not, like if you're struggling, just go get help. If you can do it, if I can do it, anybody can effing do it. Trust me. Like, it wasn't easy, but you can do it.
Look, we've done a lot of these interviews, and I love that these interviews serve as, at least in my own opinion, a middle chapter for a lot of people.
Yeah.
It's very cool to hear your story. I can't believe you're an introvert because this has been such an incredible interview.
Oh,
I
thanks.
think you're going to help so many people with sharing your story, and thank you for that.
No, thank you.
But I genuinely feel like we're in the first third of your book, and
I should write a book.
And I'm so excited for your next chapters because you've made such progress, and this is so amazing.
Well, thanks.
Thank you for being a part of this podcast.
No, thank you for having me. Like I said, I was super nervous, but this was cool. I like this.
Yeah. You did an incredible job.
Oh, good.
And I hope that I left a lasting impression on you. That's the next time I see you, you'll remember me.
Yes, I will remember
Okay.
you this time, I promise.
All right, cool. But thank you again. And on behalf of me, Keith, and the APN team, we're so proud of you, and we're so excited about your future.
Oh, thank you so much.
So if you're interested in seeing more podcasts or some of our podcasts or other episodes, you could visit us at apn.com/podcast. That's apn.com/podcast. If you have any questions or comments for us, please email us at pod@apn.com. That is pod@apn.com. Also, we have Facebook pages, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram for all of our updates and social clips. Please follow us. The handle is APN @APN Lodge. I will do that over tomorrow, Keith, so don't worry about this.
Dan, it's been a long day, man. That's a fine closeout for me. Thank you for doing it. Thank you both.